Hey guys, it's Robert here. I'm in Japan again to see Godzilla Monster Planet. I'm here at the Toho Cinemas IMAX at the Hotel Gracery Shinjuku. I just bought my ticket. Let's hope it's good. And here I am back from Japan. I really wanted to shoot this video while I was still in Japan. Unfortunately, there just wasn't time. So I'm back in the United States, and this is my review of Gojira Kaiju Wakusei, or Godzilla Monster Planet, Planet of the Monsters, whatever you want to call it. This is the first feature-length animated Godzilla film produced by Toho Animation. It's part of a planned trilogy, and because of that, it really doesn't feel like its own film. It feels more like an episode of something bigger. And I know a lot of times with trilogies you can get away with that, but for me that's a big letdown because I believe that a film should be able to stand on its own as a narrative piece with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And while this movie clearly had that, it does feel like it falls short at the end of the movie. There are going to be lots of spoilers in this review, so if you don't like spoilers, now's the time to tune out. And with that said, let's get started. Like I said, this movie is part of a planned trilogy. Godzilla's design in the film looks something like a cross between Legendary's Godzilla from 2014 and the vegetable gremlin from Gremlins 2. If we take a look at him here, he does have sort of a plant-like design to him. Even his dorsal spines look like pieces of lettuce. There's been a lot of speculation online as to what exactly he is. Is this a plant Godzilla? Did he evolve from plants? And the film actually goes on to explain that he's neither plant nor animal. His body is actually made out of a metallic plant-like material. So maybe he's plant in origin, we don't exactly know. But overall, I do like this design a lot. I didn't think I was going to when it was first unveiled, but it works well and it serves the narrative in this movie. As for the animation, I have to admit that I wasn't terribly impressed by it. It's 3D animation that's done in sort of a 2D cel shade animation style, and while it looked good overall, it just really didn't work that well for me. At times you felt more like you were watching cutscenes from a video game as opposed to a feature-length animated film done by, say, Pixar or DreamWorks or some studio like that. The color palette in this movie is very bland. Everything has kind of this sick greenish color to it. And at times the animation wasn't always smooth, especially with Godzilla. Because he's so big, a lot of the times that we see him moving around on the screen, it looked like he was just done in a different frame rate than everything else, or something. Something was off, and he didn't look as smooth as he could have. So I have to say that because of that, the animation was just it was so-so for me. But I wasn't blown away by it. The music in this movie is kind of a cross between traditional orchestration and the kind of techno sort of music that you would expect to hear in an anime or in a video game. Anytime there's a big battle or a big fight scene going on, it sort of turns into this loud kind of droning techno music, which I didn't particularly care for. The music is by no means comparable to the score that Shiro Sagisu did for Shin Godzilla, which I found to be excellent. This music is just sort of there, it serves its purpose, but there's never a moment when it really stands out. So I wasn't terribly impressed by the music either. As for the story itself, I have to say that when this movie was first announced, I was really intrigued by the initial concept. The idea of Godzilla taking the Earth and driving humans off of the planet. We go in search of someplace else to live, but then ultimately we realize humans can only really survive on this planet, and so it's time now to go back, reclaim the Earth from Godzilla, and how do we establish a plan in order to be able to do that? The problem is when you see the actual film, the novelty of that idea wears off quickly, and you realize right away that they've sort of taken this idea as far as they can take it pretty early on in the film. The movie takes place in the year 2048, with Godzilla and basically the world's monsters destroying the Earth. All the monsters from the classic Godzilla franchise are part of this universe, and they're all just sort of rampaging around the globe, destroying cities, killing millions of people, and so because of that, humanity is on the brink of extinction. During the opening credits, we are shown a montage of news footage and newspaper articles showing some of these monsters destroying cities around the world. And chief among them is the king of the monsters, Godzilla, who has sort of just pushed humanity to the edge. It becomes clear that if this goes on for too much longer, the human race will be wiped out. At this point, a group of aliens mysteriously arrives and offers to help the human race get off the planet before it's too late. This is when we're first introduced to our main character, Haruo Sakaki. As a small boy, Haruo and one of his relatives are being boarded onto these large spacecraft as the last remnants of humanity are evacuating the planet. During the evacuation, Godzilla himself shows up and actually starts destroying the launch complex. And during this destruction, Haruo actually witnesses his parents being killed, and that goes on to really drive his character's motivation for the rest of the story, which is to get revenge and kill Godzilla. After this scene, the ships take off and venture out into space, and for the next 20 years they go in search of another habitable planet for the human race to live on. The downside of this is they only have so much food and water and supplies aboard the ship, and so over a 20-year period, we really see the group of survivors on board the ship sort of stricken with hunger, depression. People are committing suicide because the future looks so bleak at this point. They actually find a planet which they think might be habitable, but they discover very quickly that humans can't live on this planet, and so now they're kind of sunk. Their plan has kind of come to a standstill. An adult Haruo tries to lead a mission to go back to Earth and reclaim the planet, but police or soldiers or whoever they are aboard the ship, they corner him, he's placed under arrest, and he's put into a holding cell for really most of the first act of the film. The first act is mostly about the people in charge aboard this ship trying to determine, okay, well, what do we do? This planet's uninhabitable, we're running low on supplies. What's our next move? What do we do? Do we keep searching, or do we just let everybody die off? What's the next step of the plan? And at the same time, Haruo has been doing research on Godzilla based on new data that has been received by the ship. And he speaks to one of his close friends aboard the ship, one of the aliens named Metphys. And Metphys kind of tells him, you know, you have to take this plan of yours and you have to bring it, to the people in charge. So later on in the film, we see Haruo. He's in handcuffs, allowed to go before the people in charge aboard the ship and present his plan, which is pretty much that based on new data, he's determined Godzilla has this, I guess, electromagnetic force field, this bubble that envelops him, and that is what has protected him from any kind of attack that humans have ever tried to launch on him. It's what has kept him alive all these years. It's the source of his defense mechanism. And Haruo believes that he has come up with a way to penetrate this defense mechanism, and if they can do that, then perhaps there's a way that they can use it to kill Godzilla. If they can breach his defenses, they can mount an attack and try to kill him. Well, because of their dire situation, like I said, they're running out of food, people are sort of coming to their wits' end. The people aboard the ship decide, okay, you know what, it's time to go back, let's turn the ship around, and let's return to Earth, and let's at least get a look at Godzilla and see if there isn't a way that we can take back this planet. So they go into light speed or warp drive or whatever you want to call it, and they travel back to Earth. The problem here is that because of time dilation, while only 20 years have passed for the people aboard the ship, 20,000 years pass between the time that they leave and the time that they get back to Earth. So now we see a completely different Earth, completely different from the Earth that they left behind. All traces of human civilization have been wiped out, and the planet looks completely different from the one that they left. It's sort of a like a tropical rainforest planet, overgrown with dense forests and just very sort of primeval looking. Once they reach Earth, they send down a series of probes to scan the planet in order to determine the location of Godzilla. One of the probes manages to find a hit on Godzilla, and they even hear his roar. It's the last thing that they hear broadcast by this probe before the probe is presumably destroyed by Godzilla. So now it's time to go down to the planet's surface and carry out Haruo's plan of attack. This is where things got a little weird for me. Like I said, this is an interesting concept in theory, but we're maybe 30 minutes into the movie, and already we've kind of exhausted the idea of leaving the Earth. Very quickly they determine, oh, we can't live here, it's time to go back. Now they're back on Earth, and now they're searching for Godzilla. It just, I don't know, it felt very convenient that, not only do they come back to the planet, they find Godzilla very quickly, they don't bother to survey the rest of the planet looking for other, potentially hospitable places that they could colonize. No, they come back to Earth, they find Godzilla, they focus specifically on the spot where he is, and they try to mount an attack to destroy him from the onset. To me, there's a whole planet that you guys can live on. And yeah, it's different from the planet that you left behind, but still, there's lots of Earth that you could potentially share with Godzilla. If he's on one side of the planet, build a colony on the other, and then just don't worry about it. Then you've got plenty of time to develop your plan before you attack Godzilla. But no, because Haruo is bent on revenge, they go right for the throat, and they land and they immediately start trying to find Godzilla and carry out their plan to destroy him. This is where the title becomes a bit misleading, because Kaiju Wakusei, or Monster Planet, implies that there's going to be lots of monsters on this planet. So when I first heard the initial premise of the film, I thought, oh wow, this is great, because they're going to come back to Earth 20,000 years later, and they're going to find that not only is the planet been taken over by Godzilla, but all the monsters, right? We're going to see Rodan, we're going to see Mothra, maybe King Ghidorah, all the great monsters from the Godzilla franchise, and of course, chief among them, sort of the ruler of this planet, will be Godzilla. Similar to Monster Island in Destroy All Monsters, we'll get to see all of Earth's monsters on this planet. And very quickly, you realize that this planet, for the most part, is uninhabited. There's one race of dragon-like creatures called the Servum that are supposed to be descended from Godzilla. They find out later that the Servum and really all the plant life on this planet is all made from the same metallic plant matter hybrid that Godzilla is made from. So he has literally, he has not become adapted to his environment. The environment of Earth has become adapted to him. And so because of that, I felt like the title was misleading, and I felt a bit let down because, like I said, I was hoping to get to see all of the monsters from the Godzilla franchise on this planet. Instead, we're given Godzilla and then one other species of sort of generic dragon monsters, and that's it. That's your monster planet. Another problem that I had with the movie right away is the fact that when they land on Earth, they have to wear their spacesuits, they have to wear their oxygen helmets. I mean, this is not a hospitable environment for them. It's sort of like Pandora from Avatar, where it's a planet that's lush and jungle and has lots of rainforest and what have you, but it's really not suitable anymore for human beings to live. I mean, this is not the Earth that we left behind. It's a totally new planet now, and it's totally inhospitable to human beings. At one point, one of the scientists, I believe it's actually Metphies, takes a sample of a leaf from one of the, from the local vegetation, does a DNA analysis on it, and determines that not only is this plant made from the same metallic plant fibers that Godzilla's made from, but that it's virtually indestructible. I mean, I can't imagine that you would actually be able to grow crops on this planet and be able to eat anything on this planet. Like I said, there really aren't animals that they could eat. There's no water at any point that I remember seeing in the film. So this isn't a planet that you would necessarily want to live in. I get that it's Earth, but it's not the Earth that we knew. And to me, that makes it... it's hard to wonder why these people are willing to fight so hard and risk everything in an all-out war with Godzilla for a planet that we really wouldn't even be able to live on anymore. Along the way, we've met some other characters, Metphies, Haruo's alien friend, Yuko Tani, who is pretty much the only notable female character in the film. And my problem with her and with Metphies and really all of the characters in this movie is that nobody really stands out. There's nobody that really makes any kind of major impact on the audience or on the story. Everybody's just kind of there, and nobody really feels like they're contributing anything to the story. Yuko is supposed to be Haruo's friend. She's known him for a long time, but she's really one-dimensional. I mean, like I said, she doesn't really add anything to the story. She just kind of follows Haruo around. I liked Metphies, but he's really not given much to do. We don't see him all that much, and even though he's a cool character, they never really elaborate on him at all. They don't explain his character very much, and like Haruo himself, again, everybody's just really one-dimensional. Haruo is your standard character who's obsessed with revenge and will stop at nothing to kill Godzilla. But apart from that, we don't really know anything about him. We don't know who he was before the events of the story. We don't really get any insight into who he is now. We just spend the majority of the film watching him handcuffed and looking very angry. And when he does talk, it's only about how he wants to destroy Godzilla. At this point, the ship that Haruo and Yuko are on is making a low pass over the jungle when they pick up readings of Godzilla and determine it's time to get the heck out of here. As they're trying to turn the ship around, Godzilla attacks, the ship crashes, and while everybody is trying to evacuate, Haruo gets on a hover bike and proceeds to fly circles around Godzilla, shooting a laser cannon at him and trying to divert his attention. He's successful in luring Godzilla away just long enough for his people to get off the ship, but this is the first time that they see, in the flesh, Godzilla towering above them before they make their retreat back into the jungle. At the beginning of the third act, we see Haruo in your standard giving a speech to the troop scene. He gets up in front of everybody and tells them it's time for them to stand up and fight back and take their planet back from Godzilla, at which point we see the first phase of Haruo's plan go into effect. Now, this scene bothered me for a few reasons. The first phase of Haruo's plan is for an army of survivors to get aboard the same hover bikes and basically dive bomb Godzilla and fire laser cans at him and swarm around him and try and weaken his electromagnetic shield before they can carry out the next stage of the attack. Part of the reason that I had a problem with this is because we have seen Godzilla face off against all manner of things. We've seen him face off against cadmium bombs. We've seen him face off against maser tanks. We've seen him face off against all manner of conventional weapons, and nothing has ever been able to inflict any kind of damage on him. So the fact that these people traveled, light years across space, 20,000 years to return to Earth, they have all this technology, and this is the best that they could come up with, is to swarm around Godzilla on a bunch of little hover bikes, firing laser cannons. I mean, imagine taking something like the speeder bikes from Return of the Jedi. You've got a couple hundred of these and swarming around Godzilla and shooting him with your little laser guns. And you really think that that's going to have any kind of effect on him? But regardless, that's the plan that they've come up with. So they flank Godzilla, they fire laser guns at him, and the idea is that this is supposed to, drive him into the zone that they want him to be in. So Godzilla enters this canyon area where they detonate charges in the surrounding rock faces, that caused an avalanche that buried Godzilla up to about his shoulders in rock. Now Godzilla is trapped here, and he's been immobilized. This is where the next stage of Haruo's plan comes into effect, which involves himself and Yuko and a number of other people getting into these mech suits, or robot suits, whatever you want to call them. They're sort of like something from Gundam or the mech suits that we saw in Avatar, jumping on Godzilla's back and driving spears in between his spines, which contain these devices that, when they penetrate deep enough into his body, will render his electromagnetic shield ineffective. In other words, they will collapse his electromagnetic shield, which protects him, and then detonate inside his body, thereby exploding Godzilla from the inside out and destroying him. And sure enough, they do just that. After enough of these spears are driven into Godzilla's body, his shield collapses, there's a huge explosion, and after the smoke clears, there's just this gigantic crater, and Godzilla is nowhere to be found. Everybody cheers, they think, oh, this is it, we finally defeated him, Godzilla's gone, and now we can start thinking about how we're going to colonize this planet. Well, very quickly, they detect seismic tremors, there's a big, loud explosion, rumbling, and they look up, and erupting from this mountain is the real Godzilla. That's right, there are two Godzillas in this film. The first one that we see throughout the majority of the movie is much smaller. I've heard that he's actually supposed to be about 50 meters tall. The second, the true Godzilla, which erupts from this mountain, stands 300 meters tall, or about 984 feet tall, making this by far the biggest Godzilla of any film in the entire Godzilla franchise, be it Japanese or American. He towers over all of them, including Legendary's Godzilla from 2014 and Shin Godzilla from 2016. This Godzilla is about 3 times as big as they are, so he's gigantic. This Godzilla proceeds to kick everybody's ass. He wipes out the ships, the mech robots, the hover bikes. He wipes out everything with his atomic breath. And the last shot of the movie is Haruo half buried in a pile of rubble, looking up at Godzilla before him and realizing that they have failed. Their mission has failed, and Godzilla reigns supreme on Earth once more. So overall, did I like this film or not? It's really tough to say. It's kind of a mixed bag. The first time that I saw it, I didn't really care for it. I wasn't impressed by the movie at all. I waited about a week before I went and saw it again. And admittedly, I did like it better the second time. Fortunately, I was able to see it both times in the Toho Cinema at the Hotel Gracery Shinjuku, and that experience alone, the experience of getting to see a Godzilla movie, be it live action, be it anime, in a theater in Japan, really goes a long way to help you enjoy the experience. I mean, good Godzilla or bad Godzilla movie, just to be there and to be able to see one of these movies on the big screen, like I said, that goes a long way to help improve the experience overall. So, did I enjoy this movie? Yes, I found it to be entertaining. It's very exposition heavy in the first 2 acts, very similar to how Shin Godzilla was. It does pick up a bit in the 3rd act. There's some pretty good action scenes, even if I did think they were a little ridiculous, like bombarding Godzilla with a swarm of hover bikes. I digress. I did enjoy the movie. I found it to be very entertaining. It's a solid standout Godzilla entry in the franchise, even if it is just part of a planned trilogy of animated films. One of the things that I really appreciated about this movie was the treatment of the character and the story. Godzilla is painted as that indestructible super monster, totally serious. There's never a moment of this movie where he's laughable or silly or campy, even though a lot of the characters come across as being sort of one-dimensional, stereotypical characters that you would see in sort of a sci-fi action revenge movie. They're never silly. There isn't any humor in this movie. It's treated very respectfully and has a very serious tone throughout the film, and I really appreciated that because I always have preferred, while I love, the silly, campy movies of the Showa series, and even, a lot of that carried over into Heisei and the Millennium series, I have always preferred when Godzilla is taken seriously in a film, like the original Gojira in 1954, The Return of Godzilla in 1984, and Shin Gojira, when Godzilla is treated respectfully. I always appreciate that, so I appreciated that a lot in this film. He really is presented here as the king of the monsters, and so I was thankful for that. I know a lot of people don't particularly care for the song. I have to be honest. The song Whiteout, it's performed by a group called Zai, I believe is how you pronounce it. I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually. While I was in Japan, they were playing it all over the place. I heard it a couple times in different malls. I heard it, obviously, in the lobby at the theater. I heard it when I was at Mandarake looking at Godzilla toys. I mean, the song was everywhere. And I gotta say, I mean, you know, it's not the type of song that you would expect to hear in a traditional Godzilla film. But because this was an anime, the rules are different, things are different, and this is definitely the sort of song that you would expect to hear at the end of an anime. But as is the case with a lot of anime, the songs are, some are good, some are bad, it's a hit or miss. I think Whiteout is really good, so I enjoyed it a lot. It's sort of a guilty pleasure of mine. I've listened to it a number of times since I got back from Japan, so I really liked the song. My final review of the film is that, again, upon second viewing, I did like it a lot. I'm curious to see where they go with it after the ending. If you stay throughout the end credits, which is sort of a tradition in Japan, there is an after-credits scene that shows Haruo wake up in what looks like a cave. He's sleeping, there's a fire burning next to him. He wakes up, he looks over and sees what I can only imagine is an indigenous girl. Young girl, looks like she's in her teens, and she's sort of painted with like Aborigines kind of like paint on her face, like tribal paint. She is clearly an indigenous human that has adapted to living on this post-Godzilla world. Like I said, everybody else throughout the movie has been wearing, you know, oxygen helmets and space suits, so it's presumed that at least at the time they arrive, they don't feel like they can live on this planet without their suits on. It's not habitable at the time that they arrive. This girl appears to have survived for, you know, she and her people have survived for 20,000 years on this planet without the need for, you know, respirators or spacesuits, and they are able to live because they've adapted on this planet. Anyway, Haruo looks up, he sees this girl, immediately he looks to his right, and he sees, buried in this cave, the remnants of Mecha Godzilla. That's right. Earlier on in the film, before the humans left Earth, we see a group of people in an underground bunker, these military people, talking about Mecha Godzilla. We've got to launch the Mecha Godzilla. But because Godzilla is advancing and he's about to attack, there's no time and everybody has to evacuate. And he's been down there for 20,000 years by this point. So immediately we get the impression that Haruo's idea is, here's the Mecha Godzilla. We've got to find a way to launch this thing. So the movie ends there, and at the very end we see an advertisement for the next movie in this planned trilogy, in which Godzilla is going to very likely face off against Mecha Godzilla, this new incarnation of Mecha Godzilla. So I will be curious to see where the story goes from there. I will be curious to see exactly what this new Mecha Godzilla looks like, because what we see of him underground in this bunker, he looks, you know, very mechanical, but he doesn't look like any incarnation of Mecha Godzilla that we've seen up until this point. Very radical changes in his design. So it'll be very interesting to see where they go from there, and if this new Mecha Godzilla can even remotely stand up against this 300-meter tall incarnation of a Super Godzilla. So again, like I said, overall, upon second viewing, I did enjoy the movie a lot more than I thought. Do I have plans to go all the way to Japan in May to see the sequel? No. I'll probably wait for it to come out on Netflix, which, as far as I know, at this time, there's still no official release date for Godzilla Monster Planet on Netflix. I'm hoping that it will come out within the next few months or so. It may be another case like what happened with Shin Godzilla, where they released the film theatrically here in America just about a month or so after it released in Japan, but it still took them about a year or so to get it subtitled and dubbed for the American Blu-ray release. So we could be waiting a while, but in the meantime, we've got 2 more Godzilla movies planned in this animated trilogy. So it's an exciting time to be a Godzilla fan, and I'm very excited to see where we go from here. So with that said, that does it for this review. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave your comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Sayonara!